Welcome to HEA's HypnoConnect, the podcast by the Hypnosis Education Association. Real conversations, expert insights, and meaningful connection. Brought to you by HypnoBiz in a Box, the ultimate all-in-one hypnosis business platform. Let's get to it. We're excited to introduce Francis O'Brien, a clinical hypnotherapist and owner of Relieve Your Mind. With a passion for empowering individuals to take control of their lives, Francis specializes in helping clients unlock the power of their subconscious minds to create meaningful change. In today's HypnoConnect session, Francis will dive into the question, what is hypnosis? And clear up common misconceptions about this powerful technique. She'll explain how hypnosis is not a loss of control, but rather a means of using the mind's immense power to heal and create the life we truly want. This session is essential for anyone curious about hypnosis and how it can support personal healing and transformation. We'll turn it over to Francis here in just a moment, but for now, your hosts for HypnoConnect, your HEA President, Melanie McCool, and HEA's Vice President, yours truly, Sean Bray.
Howdy doody.
That would be us. Hello and welcome, Francis. We're so glad to have you with us today.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm so glad to be here. And I want to thank you both and the Hypnosis Education Association for inviting me to speak to you today.
Awesome.
And what is hypnosis? Hypnosis is a very misunderstood phenomenon. And it's important to understand precisely what it is, because a lot of people believe that hypnosis is, as was mentioned in the intro, that it's the one person has the ability, the hypnotist has the ability to take over the subject's mind and to control it. That is never really true. Whenever hypnosis or hypnotherapy occurs, there's always agreement on the part of the subject to some extent. Now, perhaps you've seen movies, television shows, or even live stage performances with a stage hypnotist, and it appears that the things that the hypnotist is doing to the subjects there on stage is, it's making them look silly, it's making them do things that they would not normally do. But the truth is, the kind of people who go to see stage performance, to see hypnosis performance shows, find that kind of thing entertaining. And so just even as audience members, they're already very good subjects for the hypnotist on the stage. And the hypnotist knows how to say things to the audience that will make their most suggestible audience members the most likely to volunteer to go up on the stage to have these things done to them. So in that case, there may not be a consent form where the person signs it, but the person is consenting to have those things done to them. So they do agree, they do consent to it. Now, some people think that hypnosis is this mystical, magical state that only a few people experience. In reality, hypnosis is a very normal, natural state of mind, and we all experience it at least twice a day. Most of us experience it far more frequently than only twice a day. All that hypnosis means is that you're in your alpha brainwave state. Now, when you are, as you are now, you're wide awake, you're able to pay attention, you're alert. Now you're in your what's called the beta brainwave state. When you're sound asleep, and unless somebody spoke to you loudly enough to awaken you and engage you in conversation, you would not be able to follow a conversation. You're in your delta brainwave state. Between beta and delta, there are two other states of mind. One is called alpha, the one closest to beta, and the other one is called theta. Now, alpha and theta, well, theta is a deeper version of alpha, and hypnosis occurs most often in the alpha brainwave state. Now, since they occur between being wide awake and being asleep, as you're falling asleep, you pass through the state of hypnosis. And as you're awakening, you pass through the state of hypnosis again. It's estimated that it's approximately half an hour before falling asleep and half an hour after awakening that you're in this state of hypnosis, but all being in the alpha brainwave state really means is that you are far more suggestible to what's going on around you. So during this time when you're falling asleep and when you're first awakening in the morning, those are not good times to, for example, listen to the news, because the news is usually very negative. It's all about all the bad things that are happening in the world. They're also not good times to watch those, the crime drama shows where people are getting chased and shot and killed and things like that, because the negativity of those things, of the news or that kind of show, will have a much greater impact on you. You'll be much more affected by the negativity than if you watched those shows or listened to the news at other times of the day. Those times when you're falling asleep and awakening are, however, very good times to engage in positive activities, which is why so many people, when they're falling asleep or first awakening in the morning, will pray, because they consider that to be a positive activity. That's why so many people during those times will meditate, because they feel like that, that helps them to be more positive. It's a great time to think about, read, listen to, write positive affirmations, because that's a positive activity, or to write a gratitude journal, or even to speak about what it is, to speak to yourself about what it is you're so grateful for in your life. All positive activities. And the positivity then, because you're in that alpha brainwave state, will have a much greater impact upon you. Now, those two times, falling asleep and awakening, are not the only two times we're in hypnosis. We're also in hypnosis if we're, for example, we're watching a movie or a television show and we get emotionally affected by what's happening to the character on the screen. Even if in your real life at that moment you're having a very similar experience, if you're responding to what's happening to the character on the screen, it's because you're watching that show or that movie or play, whatever it may be, while you're in the alpha brainwave state. What that means is essentially your subconscious mind, you're suggestible to the movie, and so your subconscious mind has put you into that movie. It's as though you are that character having that experience at that moment. And that's why you're so emotionally affected by it, even though it may not really be happening in your life. And at any rate, it's not happening exactly the way it's happening on the screen. Another example of being in the alpha brainwave state or hypnosis is, let's say you live with your family and you're traditionally the last one to leave in the morning. So it's your job to make sure that the door gets locked. And you do this every morning. And maybe one day you have your hands in your pockets, or you're going through your purse and you encounter your keys. And all of a sudden you cannot remember if you locked the door that morning. You just cannot remember it, even though you did it physically. You were there physically, you had the key in your hand, or however your door locks, you did it. And now you cannot remember. It's because when you locked the door, chances are good your mind was a million miles away. Maybe you were thinking about what route you were going to take. Maybe you were thinking about something you were expecting to happen that day. Maybe you were thinking about something completely unrelated. Whatever it may be, your mind was just somewhere else, and you locked the door when you were in the alpha brainwave state. And another common example that we've probably all heard is, you drive home on the same route every day, and when you arrive at your home, you can no longer remember having been on that route, because as you were driving, your mind was elsewhere. You were thinking about other things going on in your life. You were thinking about, I don't know, whatever else you may have been thinking about, but that too is a state of hypnosis. And another example, a little more fun one, is when you have a crush on someone. And you go through your day, you go to school or work or wherever it is you go, and you cannot stop thinking about your crush. And maybe you're wondering, if does your crush think about you? And maybe you tell somebody a joke and that person laughs at the joke, and think, oh, I wonder if my crush would laugh at that joke. It's because your mind is somewhere else. It's like you're not even in your body. Your mind is so busy thinking about this other person that you have a crush on, that you're not you're almost not physically experiencing what it is you are physically experiencing. So as you can see by these examples, we all experience hypnosis with some frequency, and it's a very normal, natural state of mind. Again, it means you're in your alpha brainwave state. All right. So one of the subjects that we had considered discussing was called emergency hypnosis. And this is important. This is related to hypnosis because the victim of a trauma is so consumed by it, especially a large enough trauma. Say that they've experienced a hurricane, or fires, floods. They fell, they were in a car collision, whatever it may be, something that's really big, a trauma, something you'd call a trauma. What happens is the trauma causes us to go into this alpha brainwave state. It causes us to be in the state of hypnosis because this state of hypnosis or this alpha brainwave state are a type of escape. Now, in the very deepest part of your subconscious mind is what we call the primitive mind. And within your primitive mind resides your fight or flight mechanism. Now, normally when we think of fight or flight, we think of physical fights or physical escaping, something that would cause you to punch and kick your attacker or something that would cause you to run off. But in reality, this type of escape from the body, this putting your mind somewhere else, this way that we are affected by trauma is a type of flight also, because it's, normally you're able to think things through, you're able to use your knowledge and your experience to get you through things, but this trauma has had that enormous effect on you, and now you or the person who experienced the trauma are in the alpha brainwave state. Now, when you say you're not the person who experienced the trauma, you are the one who happens upon somebody who's perhaps just been in a car crash, or somebody who lost their home to fire or flood or something like that. Somebody who's just experienced, a death or something like that, and they're no longer in this. They're no longer themselves, essentially. They're now in this alpha brainwave state. Well, if you decide that you are willing to help them, if you're a good Samaritan and you want to help them, the good news is that because you are dealing with this person in the alpha brainwave state, the things that you do will have a greater impact upon them. You are, in essence, that person's hypnotherapist or that person's hypnotist. And provided you're a good person and you do want to help the person, there are many ways that you can do that. And of course, the first thing you want to do when you witness something like, a car collision or something, an emergency, a trauma, it's always best to call the emergency number. Now, I don't know if people in other countries are watching this, and if in other countries there's a different emergency number, but in the United States, it's 911. And even if you are trained to help people who've experienced trauma, it's always a good idea to have, the backup, the ambulance, the fire truck, whatever it may be that you need. Now, once you have, well, first let me tell you about this book. This book is called The Worst Is Over, and it's by Judith Acosta and Judith Simon Prager. And what they call emergency hypnosis in this book is verbal first aid, which is, I think, a brilliant way to describe it, because that's exactly what you can do. Because you're a helpful person. You want to help this person who has just experienced that emergency. And one of the best things that you can say to somebody who has just experienced an emergency is, the worst is over. And the reason for that is that the alpha state, the hypnotic state that's brought on by the trauma, causes the person to feel that the emergency is unending, that it's all encompassing, that they're still experiencing it. So if it's the type of an emergency that has occurred and now they're responding to it, something like a car crash, a fire that's no longer a threat, or, I don't know, whatever, a fall, something like that might injure a person. They, in a sense, don't realize that the trauma the worst part of the trauma has occurred and it is now over. So when someone has experienced, after you call the emergency number, you can approach the person. Well, first after you call the emergency number, you want to take a moment to center yourself, to make sure that you are, and whether that's saying a prayer, whether it's saying your mantra, whether it's taking several deep breaths, keeping in mind that time is probably of the essence. Just take a moment to get yourself to a place that's as relaxed and calm as possible, so that when you approach the person who's in the alpha brainwave state or the state of hypnosis, you can bring that energy with you. Your energy precedes you, and the person in that state can pick up on your energy. So you want to make sure that when you approach someone in that state, you are as calm, relaxed, and presenting a confidence as you possibly can. Now, when you approach the person who's had the emergency, you can offer your name and ask the person their name. If the person is able to give you their name, use their name, because we tend to pay more attention to what's said to us when our name is involved than we do when it isn't. Now, after you do that, that's when you say, you've given them your name, you've asked them your name, you can say to them, the ambulance is on its way, and when it arrives, it will be able to help you. That's also a very good thing to share with them, because again, they're in this state of shock, this state of this alpha brainwave state, this state of hypnosis. And when you begin to hear the ambulance approaching, you can say to the person or the people who have experienced the trauma, do you hear that siren? You're going to be okay. I will stay here with you. I'm here with you. You're safe. The worst is over. When the ambulance comes, you'll easily be able to answer all of the questions asked accurately and easily. And what you're doing here is you're giving somebody in the state of hypnosis hypnotic suggestions for the positive, things that will help them to begin to heal. But you are essentially the person's hypnotherapist. You're giving them positive suggestions. If you're not quite sure what might be injured on their body, you can say to the person, you can now allow your body to begin to heal itself. And again, that may sound a little outlandish, but you're speaking directly to the person's, so the deepest part of the subconscious mind, which is where decisions are made for our bodies, which is where, the things that happen in the subconscious mind happen without consulting us first, without our agreement. They happen automatically. So you're putting these suggestions in there that will be of help to the person. Now, if the victim happens to be bleeding, you can say to the person, your body is releasing just enough blood to cleanse the wound, and you can now send clotting factor to that area. And even if the person wouldn't know in a different state of mind what clotting factor means, the subconscious mind knows what it is, and it will begin to do that. So you can help them to heal from wounds. You can help them to heal from whatever it is that they may be experiencing. As you're working with this person, narrate everything that you're doing and encourage the person to help. For example, if you see a wound and you have a clean cloth, you can compress to it. You do that while you're saying, I'm compressing. I will now compress the wound that's on your left arm, or whatever it may be. I'm now compressing the wound. You can send clotting factor to that area. If you want to take the person's hand, make sure you ask first. If you feel it necessary to touch any part of the person, narrate it first. Say things like, I'm going to touch your left arm gently now, so that they know, because they're in this state of shock or hypnosis or alpha, anything can surprise them, and you don't want to surprise them further. They've just been through a trauma. If a victim is having difficulty breathing, you can say your breathing is becoming very smooth and easy. You're getting all the oxygen you need. And again, you're telling them, you're giving them this hypnotic suggestion, and it will begin to manifest. Because you're speaking directly to the person's subconscious mind, the body will begin to respond in the way that you want, in the way that you direct them to respond. Speaking calmly and at a relaxed pace, but again, confidently, is very helpful, because it helps that person who's had the experience to know that they can rely on you to provide the help that they need. You can also say to a person who's just been in a situation where you believe that they might be wounded, you can say to that person, tell me what needs attention. And they can tell you what hurts. Maybe they'll say, my left arm hurts a lot. I don't know if it's broken or if it's sprained, but it really hurts a lot. And then after, if there's something that you can do to help the left arm, maybe you can reposition it so that it doesn't hurt quite as much. Maybe you have a splint with you, something you can use as a splint to, something solid that you can wrap a cloth around to just keep it immobile until help arrives. You can do that. But after you deal with the part that needs attention, you can also begin to ask the person about other parts of their bodies that clearly are not injured. And by doing that, the more other parts of their body, the uninjured parts of their body that you ask of them and that they think about, they'll begin to feel like the part that is injured is small by comparison, because most of their body is all right, assuming that that's how the injury has occurred, that it's only one part that needs attention, or it's only two parts that need attention, but the vast majority of the person is still in good shape. You encourage them to start thinking in terms of that healing. And also, if you approach someone who's just been in a car collision, a fall, or whatever it may be, and the person appears to be unconscious, they're unresponsive to what you're saying to them, keep in mind that unconscious people can still hear, and you can still do with this person, you can still give the same kinds of suggestion to this unconscious person that you would give to a conscious person, minus, of course, anything that requires the person's agreement, because they will not, if they're unresponsive, if they're unconscious, they will not be able to give you their agreement. But still, even the unconscious person will be using your positive healing suggestions, your positive therapeutic suggestions, to begin the healing process. And it's using the very powerful subconscious mind to cause the physical body to begin to heal. And there are many more ways of using emergency hypnosis in this book. The book is absolutely fascinating, I find, and I strongly recommend it to anyone, because one never knows when one might encounter someone else's emergency. It may be a family, a friend. It may be that you're a bypasser and you don't even know the person having the emergency. But by having the knowledge of this book to give you the confidence to approach the situation, can be, and it can even be with your experience in this situation, because if you have the trauma, you can recognize that you've gone into alpha or hypnosis, and you can then know how to get yourself out of that state of mind so that you can get yourself the help that you need. So all around, I just think it's a wonderful book. It's called The Worst Is Over, Judith Acosta and Judith Simon Prager. And another thing I wanted to talk about, because when I first discussed doing this talk, it was shortly after Florida had experienced devastating hurricanes. And that was a few months ago. And I was thinking in terms of talking in terms of the hurricanes, the hypnosis in terms of the hurricanes. And then at the beginning of this year, in Southern California, where I live, there were a series of devastating wildfires. We had a series of days where it was predicted by the National Weather Service. We were getting all kinds of alerts in advance that the weather was we were going to be having very high, hot, dry winds, which unfortunately make a perfect environment for wildfires. And even more unfortunately, arsonists took advantage of that weather condition. And most of the wildfires, if you heard about them on the news, most of the wildfires were set by arsonists. There was one that was because of some problem with one of the utility companies, but the others were set by arsonists. And the weird thing about arsonists is when you arrest them, they don't even try and pretend that they didn't do what they did. They'll say things like, oh, fire excites me. I love the smell of burning. You're just going, wow, anyway, but that's another subject. So finding hope after you've had a traumatic loss like that can be a very difficult thing to do, because unfortunately, many of us tend to define ourselves, identify ourselves according to the negativity that we've experienced. And that's because when our very earliest ancestors first appeared on the planet, they hadn't yet invented weapons. They probably hadn't yet figured out shelter. And they walked the land with beasts who thought they looked pretty darn tasty. So they had to be on the lookout at all times for the negativity. And even though today our lives are not nearly that dangerous for us, we're not continuously being threatened, our lives are not continuously being threatened, we still, that tendency to look for the negative has been passed down through the generations, and it's just as strong for us today as it was for our very earliest ancestors. So, as I mentioned earlier, a stressful, traumatic experience ushers those of us experiencing it into shock, the alpha state, or hypnosis. And from that state, it's even more difficult even to believe that hope after such a loss is possible, but even more so to get yourself to summon the will to try to find the hope to go on after such a huge loss like that. Now, when one has experienced a significant loss, a death, loss of a home due to natural or unnatural disaster, the end of a job, a fire, flood, storm, a negative medical diagnosis, whatever it may be, the person may tend to define him or herself according to that loss, unfortunately. And it's our task as family, friends, therapists, even those who maybe, maybe you don't even know the person, maybe you're the one who happened upon the scene of the trauma. We are sort of tasked with trying to get the person to find the hope after loss, because that will be the most healing thing for that person, to know that there is hope available and that their effort is required in order for them to find it. If you believe that you are the sort of person who you're kind of afraid to approach somebody who has experienced loss, and you're afraid that you'll say the wrong thing, okay, it's great that you recognize that about yourself, and that's a good thing, because then you will not be the one to approach the person. But you can, if you are all right with approaching somebody who might need your help, you can always hold space for the person. That can mean anything from listening while they talk or cry. It can mean being silent with them while you just be with them. If that's what they need. It can be offering a hug, a hand to hold, a warm meal or beverage. Even those who may, happen upon the scene of a person and you don't even know the person who's had that experience, it's always good to try and help the person to sort of rise up from the negative eddy that they're probably in, the negative whirlpool that they probably feel that they're in. Now, if you don't feel like you can approach a person, even prayers, positive intentions, sending them positive energy, that all counts as holding space for them. If you know somebody who has experienced a natural disaster and you didn't, Perhaps you could be the one to contact the Federal Emergency Management Agency in the United States, FEMA, or more local resources available. Maybe there are, food banks or places that offer shelter or something like that. Maybe you could be the one to research that for them and give them that information. That too is very helpful. When you can visualize on their behalf that they're healing from whatever the traumatic loss was, and they are healing from it. They're living the life that would be healthier and happier for them than what they were when they first experienced the traumatic loss. I mentioned the wildfires in Southern California at the beginning of this year. One really heartwarming thing that came of it was that those were not, well, not this part yet, but that was not the only occasion when there were wildfires like that. People had experienced them in previous years where the fires were just like, and your entire house was gone, those people who had experienced the fires in the past came forward in droves to volunteer for the people who'd experienced it at the beginning of this year. There were so many people helping that unless you showed up to a volunteer organization very first thing in the morning, it was really difficult to volunteer. And I knew a lot of people who were very disappointed that they couldn't. And while I felt sorry for them that they weren't, they had this angelic intention that they were not able to complete, it just made my heart swell to hear so many people wanting to help those who experienced it this year. Now, those who've experienced loss, allow them to mourn, even if the loss was not a death. Mourning can be triggered by many things, far more than death. It can be, the loss of a home, the loss of a job, a medical diagnosis they didn't want. But, unfortunately, these things happen with some frequency, and, allow them to have that time to mourn and try to be there for the victims in any way that you can. If you feel you can't help the person yourself, but you're able to donate to an organization that can help people in that position, that counts too. Now, after a year or two, if you know somebody who has experienced a traumatic loss and it seems they're still in it and they haven't really begun to heal from it, suggesting therapy is not a terrible thing to do, but just allow the person, understand that the person may decide not to do that. Because as I said earlier, some of us define ourselves by the negatives that we've experienced. And some people, if it was the death of a loved one, they may feel like it's disrespectful to be happy again or something like that. And if the person is of age, 18 or older, we have to respect that for them, even if it hurts us to see them in that situation. If you offer the help of therapy, if you know somebody who's a therapist who could help them, and the person who's had the trauma says they can't afford it, there are therapists who work pro bono and therapists who work at low cost on a sliding scale or something like that. Perhaps you could be the one to research that for the person who's experienced the loss. Now, if someone's lost a home, a business, or other property, again, you could be the one to investigate FEMA in the United States, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, maybe Habitat for Humanity, maybe more local resources, local food banks, shelters, that kind of thing. And that can all be very helpful information for somebody who has experienced a trauma. And now, the one last thing. Please never tell anyone who's experienced a trauma, a loss of any kind, that they should be over it by now. Trauma and loss are both defined by the people who experience them. And it is not up to us to tell a person what their timeline should be. It may make some people feel more comfortable to think that the person will be done with it at a certain time, but that's a very unsympathetic, unempathetic way to approach a person, and allow the person to have their loss. And if they wind up not taking your suggestions for help, accept that the person is so affected and so much still perhaps in alpha or the hypnosis state that we can't force somebody to go to therapy. We can't force somebody to take our help, and we can't force somebody to heal. So allow that the person may not be ready to heal. Allow that the person may feel it's that's just who they are. I have one friend whom I love with all my heart and soul, but the woman is a catastrophist. Regardless of what happens, whether it happens to somebody else or whether it happens to her, she will make it the biggest, worst thing that could have happened. And even if it's happening to somebody else, she'll make how worried she is all about her and how awful it is. And, she's a friend I've had for many, many decades, and I love her and I would love to help her, but she simply will not accept the help. And as time goes on, she becomes more and more of a catastrophist, and it breaks my heart to have to accept it, but she's a grown woman and she is allowed to make her own decisions. So we have to be there for people who have experienced trauma as best we can, but not to try and force them. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you for being here. If anybody has any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them.
Well, that was fantastic.
Thank you so much.
You
Thank you.
You have such I was telling Melanie about halfway through, and I was like, you got such a really grounding energy to you.
Thank you. So do you.
I'd hire you as a hypnotherapist. That's for darn sure. And I sure hope that you have an Amazon affiliate link for that book.
Right. You mean for this one, I can put it on my website.
Yes, you get an Amazon affiliate link.
Okay.
Why not?
All right.
Yeah, that was truly amazing. It's just a good refresher on what we do know as hypnotherapists, and just a refresh on coming in on a trauma. It was very wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
I'd just love to add that I really do appreciate everything that you shared, and thank you for bringing your presence and your compassion to this topic as well. I have to say, I don't recall in my training a lot of time spent on the care and concern for the traumas and aren't they all traumas, right? As I was listening to you speak, I thought this verbal first aid is such a great concept. Somebody don't own that URL, you better get it now, because it's a great concept. And I thought of all the practical applications of that pacing tool that word is. And the other, thank you for bringing attention to that. And also the worst is over. I know that's the name of the book, but I was reflecting on how useful a term that is in a trauma. At first, I had a reaction to hearing it like, well, that's kind of a negative. I mean, you have to imagine the worst now to negate that, right? But what I realized was happening in that suggestion is that the mind is trying to predict the worst next thing that's going to happen. And you've now communicated it's already happened. So it technically kind of puts it behind you. And I thought, what a wonderful thing to help someone with during an abreaction in a regression, for example. If an aspect of self that's reliving a certain traumatic event, as we're letting them have that authentic emotional release, to pacing them towards the next place of, reframing is that's right. That's right. Like, get it all out, run that horse up the hill. The worst is over. And then letting that just sit for a minute in that space of that aspect of self that has been replaying that story without that soundbite for years. And how that might land on a little child aspect of self to finally say, oh my God, the worst actually is over. And what a wonderful pacing tool that is to the next step of that process. So beautiful, beautiful. Thank you for that. I have one other thought, if I can just monopolize the question for a moment. I love the comment about people in trauma not being in the state to be able to perceive hope. And I often talk about this with my clients and students as well. I'm like, when you're in the well and you ask somebody to imagine running free on the top of the well into the sunlight, it's like they can't switch on a dime.
Right.
And the idea that you create a partnership with them for the hope, that's unique. That's useful. I sometimes don't know how. I'm stuck for how to help create that and find that little aspect of self that can have hope in the midst of a trauma. But I really did appreciate that awareness that we're partners. So all the language that you used and all the discussion that you used about I'm touching your hand now, or I'm compressing this wound, all that's wonderful pacing to finding hope, along with help is on the way, help is coming for you. So just loved all the practical applications of this. It was more than just a what is hypnosis discussion. It was much more than that.
Yeah, and
But
I'm going
thank you.
to chime in on you, Danny, that I was actually I was just off on a little thought, you know, and then you said the phrase, the worst is over. And I felt my body just relax. I took a deep breath, and then I was wondering what just happened, what was just said. And then I started paying attention again. And then I heard you say you lifted up the book and you mentioned it. So I just want to say that, yeah, that's a super powerful statement for sure, especially for trauma.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of the year. It must have been probably 2018 or 2019. And I can't remember exactly who said it at IACT, but I learned the phrase, and I was told, say this to the clients when you're on the call and you've just booked them in for their first session. Those who've been through trauma, say the worst is behind you. And it comes out of me just subconsciously, because this is what we do as hypnotists, right? The words, the language that we use. So I say the worst is behind you, and I can feel them, I can hear them. Take that breath and go, thank you. So even before they're coming in for their session, I'm letting them know the worst is behind you. You've lived through this hell, right? You survived it. Here you are. And we get to, you get to come out on the other side of healing. So the worst is over, the worst is behind you is another way of using that and saying that. And it makes such a beautiful difference for people.
Oh, that's lovely. I love that.
Yeah. And so think of that when you're on your consult call and you just booked them in and you're about to hang up. Yeah.
That's great. That's so comforting.
Love it.
Yeah. Awesome. And wonderful. Thank you so much, Francis.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for letting me do this. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. And I want to say, for anybody who's watching the recording, you found this helpful, please do comment and let Francis know. If you've got any questions, ask her. But really share this video. Because if you think about it, if one person who is even remotely interested in hypnosis watched this and they heard the emergency hypnosis, imagine that your share of this.
Well, they heard that, but they also heard the way that it was presented. Your calm, your grounding energy helped to really bring it home, because I've heard what is hypnosis a bazillion times, right? But this presentation was different. And there's it caught me off guard too, because I didn't know we were going to talk about emergency hypnosis, and that was very interesting.
So I'd say share this so that other people might know it, because you don't have to be a hypnotist to do emergency hypnosis.
Absolutely.
I may change the title so that it does.
That's fine.
Includes.
Yeah, Francis, it was definitely amazing. Honestly, thank you so much. Really.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, your work is amazing, honestly, and the way you conducted it was absolutely astonishing.
Oh, I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Welcome, absolutely welcome, 100%.
Thank you so much, and I know, and we'll send this out to our to those who weren't able to attend live as well. So we'll make sure that everybody gets to see it. Thank you so much again, Francis.
Thank you for joining us on HEA's HypnoConnect, the podcast by the Hypnosis Education Association, a not-for-profit organization serving the hypnosis community since 1998. Proudly sponsored by HypnoBiz in a Box, the all-in-one platform for building a thriving hypnosis practice without burnout. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to follow, leave a review, and share it with a fellow hypnotist. Ready to grow with a supportive educational community? Join the HEA today and help us spread the word about the nature, uses, and benefits of hypnosis. Visit us at hypnosiseducationassociation.com. And if you're looking to get started, streamline, or scale your hypnosis business, head on over to hypnobizinabox.com, where you'll attract steady clients, generate reliable income, and be supported by a community of like-minded hypnosis professionals. Until next time, find a hypno-buddy, stay inspired, and stay connected to HEA's HypnoConnect.